Only the latter would be degrading, not the former. For this reason, among refined and sensitive people presents that are meant to pay tribute to a person must make the money value imperceptible. The fleeting perishability of flowers and candy that one may venture to give to a lady of distant acquaintance indicates the elimination of any substantial value. The difference in value between a particular task and its money equivalent is neither always noticeable nor, even when that is true, always expressible, as in the earlier instances of the artist and the physician, the official and the scholar. If the activity is a very unindividual one and the performer an average person, as for example the unskilled worker, then the point of incommensurability is lacking, as is the process of expressing a unique personality recognizable by distinctive qualities in the work. On the other hand, whether the performer receives a compensation for the excess value rests, in principle, on whether his social position allows such ideal acknowledgments, wherever they are absent because of his general subordinate position. He is all the more degraded the more personal is the value he is forced to offer for money and only for money. Thus, the reason why medieval minstrels were looked down upon was accounted for by the fact that they sang cheerful as well as sad songs upon request and thereby prostituted their personal emotions by taking money instead of honorable recognition. In order to exclude any ideal compensation, it was therefore quite consistent with this fact that they were treated very correctly at least with regard to their economic wage in order to exclude non-material compensations. Although the minstrels by and large fared badly, they were treated impartially, particularly with reference to what was due to them. Wherever genuine personal values have to be offered for money without any further non-material compensation, one finds that a loosening, almost a loss of substance in individual life, takes place. The feeling that personal values are exchanged in monetary transactions for an inadequate compensation is certainly one of the reasons why money transactions have so often been rejected with horror by proud and high-minded people and why agriculture, its opposite, has been praised as the only proper pursuit. For example, this was the case among the nobility in the Scottish Highlands who, until the 18th century, led an isolated and purely autochthonous life, one that was guided, however, by the ideal of greatest personal freedom. Yet however much money encourages such freedom, it cannot be denied that, from the standpoint of a free, independent and self-sufficient existence, the exchange of property and achievements for money depersonalizes life after a tight network of transactions originally enclosed and intertwined people. If the subjective and objective sides of life have been separated, then depersonalization, by increasingly concentrating on the objective side, might serve the pure elaboration of the subjective side. Conversely, in a more primitive and uniform existence, it must appear unreasonable and as a loss if property and achievement, hitherto only personally enjoyed and personally granted, are reduced to a mere element of monetary transactions and to an object of its objective laws. In the transition from the medieval manorial estate to modern farming we find that the concept of the knight's status is thereby enlarged. In addition to military activity, gainful activity is now considered permissible for him, yet this refers only to the management of his own estates, a type of acquisition whose peculiarity made him look down on the merchant and the tradesman even more than had been the case previously. Here, the specific impression that monetary transactions are undignified is brought clearly into relief since both economic forms are now pushed close to each other. One of the most general sociological phenomena is that the contrast between two elements appears most clearly if they have developed out of a common soil. Sects of the same religion hate each other more intensely than totally different religious communities. The antagonism between small neighboring city-states was always more passionate than that between large countries with their spatially and objectively different spheres of interest. In fact, it has been claimed that the most fervent hatred that exists is that existing among blood relatives. This increase in antagonism out of a background of a community of interests in some cases seems to reach a peak when the common interest or similarity is in the process of increasing. Thus there is a danger that the difference in contrast, the preservation of which is in the interest of at least one of the parties, will become blurred. The more a lower and a higher element approach each other, the more vigorously will the latter emphasize the points of difference that still exist and the higher will it value them. Hence passionate and aggressive class hatred does not emerge where the classes are separated by an unbridgeable gulf, but rather at that moment at which the lower class has already begun to rise, and when the upper class has lost some of its prestige and the leveling of both classes can be discussed. The lord of the manor, during the process of becoming a managing estate farmer, therefore felt an increased need to distinguish himself from the money-minded merchant. He managed the estate but originally only for his own needs, and did not sell his produce for money. If he did do so, then it was only his own product. He was not in the service of the money lender, as is the merchant with his direct personal skill. For a similar motive, although in cooperation with others, the Spartan citizen was allowed to own land, but not to farm it himself. It was very important for aristocratic interests to emphasize any difference with other sellers because money transactions have democratic leveling consequences, especially if the person in the higher social position takes the money, and the person in the lower position takes the product, since both parties are easily considered to be equal to one another. Therefore the aristocrat considers money transactions degrading, whereas the peasant, if he pays the lord of the manor in money rather than in goods, thereby experiences an elevation of his position. The sale of personal values for money also illustrates the unique quality of money which, with its own indecision and lack of content, cultivates all the opposites of historical psychological possibilities and molds them into definite entities. In such an increasingly practical world, money, the embodiment of the relativity of things, appears, as it were, to be the absolute which embraces and upholds the oppositions of all that is relative. 3. Labor money and its rationale. The importance of the money equivalence of work has been referred to so often in these pages, both directly and indirectly, that here I only wish to examine one more question of principle that is relevant to it, namely, whether labor itself is indeed the value that actually forms in concreto the element of value in all economic items to the same extent that it is expressed in abstracto through money. The attempts to derive all economic values from a single source and to reduce them to a single expression such as labor, costs, uses, etc., would certainly not have arisen had not the convertibility of all these values into money, into a unit of their essence, suggested it, and had it not served as a security for the recognizability of precisely this unit. The concept of labor money that arises in socialist plans expresses this connection. Thus, work performed as the sole value-creating factor alone gives the right to claim the products of others' labor, and for this one knows of no other form for characterizing the symbol and recognition of a specific amount of labor than money. Therefore, money must itself be conserved here as a unified form of value, whereas its momentary character will be rejected because its own existence prevents it from being the adequate expression of the fundamental power of value. If one permits nature as well as labor to be a creator of value, so that labor also possesses value out of the material extracted from nature, and thus, as the saying goes, although work is the father of wealth, earth is the mother, then the socialist line of thought must nonetheless lead to labor money. For since the treasures of nature should no longer be private but common property, and a priori each should, in the same manner, be the accessible basis of economic life as such, then that which each person has to give in exchange is thus ultimately only his labor. Of course, if he has exchanged a valuable product of nature with the aid of his labor and exchanged it once more, an individual can take its material value into account. Yet the amount of its value is still only the same as the value of his labor for which he has acquired it, and this thus forms the measure of its exchange value for the product of nature in question. If labor is thus the ultimate authority to which all the value determinations of the object must be referred, then it is inappropriate and a diversion to measure it in terms of an alien object such as money.